Hi, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Our devotion for today, February 8th, 2022, is from the Gospel of John, from the last verse of chapter 7 and into chapter 8. Verse 7, or chapter 7, verse 53. They went each to his own house, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. The Jewish Feast of Booths has now ended, and the people go home. Jesus didn't go home. He went to the Mount of Olives, where he would pray at night, as was his custom. Verse 2, in the early morning he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. Well, it's early morning. Jesus returns to the temple. John tells us that all the people, so there was a large number again, came to Jesus in the temple to see him, to hear him, and to learn from him. And so he sat down and he taught them. This is the way that rabbis taught. They came, sat down, and began to teach. Verses 3 through 6. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" This was said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and he wrote with his finger on the ground. All right, so the scribes and the Pharisees, they know Jesus is back in the temple teaching the people, and so they bring him a woman who's been caught in the act of adultery. They place her in the midst of Jesus and the group of people he's teaching, and they point out to Jesus that the law of Moses says that they are to stone such women as this one who's been caught in adultery. They ask Jesus what he says about this. What does he say they should do? Should they stone her or not? This was all a test designed to trap Jesus and identify him either as a person who disregards the law of Moses and then should therefore not be listened to, or as a person who will coldly have her killed for her sin, upsetting some of the people who would rather mercy might be shown. So it's a trap that it's designed in such a way that the Pharisees and scribes think Jesus doesn't have any good way out. It's a win-win for them, lose-lose for Jesus. Verse 7 and 8. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. Jesus has soaked all of this in. He's noticed that there's no man who has been brought with this woman and charged with adultery. I mean, it takes two, doesn't it? Why isn't he there in the midst with the woman? The religious leaders didn't care about the woman. They didn't mind if she got killed or not. She had less value in their minds and hearts than a man would. She was just a means to an end. They probably figured, she was going to be stoned one way or another. Jesus understands their motives. He's been listening attentively. He stands up and neither agrees nor disagrees with what they have to say. He answers instead, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And then Jesus bends back down and he writes again with his finger on the ground. I'd love to know what he wrote. Jesus' response does not conflict with what the law of Moses says. He didn't say, "You shouldn't stone her," and he didn't say, "Go ahead and stone her." What he says is, let the person who is without sin be the first to throw a stone. And here's a clear example of why man should not be judging man in matters like this. Is because we're all sinful. There's no one who is able to throw a stone against another for sinning because we're all guilty of sinning. The only one who's not guilty of sinning is God. God stands in the judgment seat as the only proper authority to judge right and wrong, to judge sinner and non-sinner, and to issue punishment. It appears that God's judgment in this case through Jesus is to show mercy. Verse 9 through 11. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with a woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on sin no more." See, those who are trying to trap Jesus now realize that they have horribly failed in their attempt. And they end up leaving one by one, beginning with the older ones who realize more quickly perhaps than the younger that Jesus has bested them. Jesus stands up once again and addresses the woman, asking her if there was anyone left to condemn her, and she tells him there's no one. Jesus, showing God's mercy and grace, says that he doesn't come to condemn her either. And I mean, that's true. Jesus didn't come into the world to condemn sinners. He came into the world to save sinners. This woman has sinned. Jesus is more interested in saving her than condemning her. And he says, "Go, and from now on sin no more." She has life once again. Jesus came into the world not to condemn us. He came into the world to forgive us and to save us. And this is a perfect example of what he came into the world to do for each one of us. Put yourself in the woman's place, because you are a sinner. Now, because your sins require punishment and ultimately death, aren't you grateful? Aren't you thankful that Jesus has come to forgive you, to save you from your sins, and to give you life again? Go in peace, serve the Lord.